There are licensed games, and then there's Kingdom Hearts, very probably the biggest and strangest cross-company undertaking in video game history. Over the course of almost 20 years, Square's borrowed dozens of Disney characters and adapted them for its bonkers multiverse plotline. Kingdom Hearts 3 is its most ambitious use of Disney properties yet, from trying to create photorealistic Pirates of the Caribbean characters while simultaneously trying to capture Pixar animation magic for the first time. It's such an unusual task that in getting the chance to talk with multiple members of the game's team, my first question was invariably, what's working with Disney like? The range of answers reveals a lot about how both Disney and Square Enix work and the challenges and rewards of their ongoing relationship. Kingdom Hearts 3 marks the first time a game in the series has been made up of predominantly CG movie sources, and it's had a pleasant side effect for the developers. It's the first time Disney has provided its own original digital assets for Square Enix to work with.
This time around, because we were planning on making such a high-end game, we talked to Disney about sharing resources with us, because up until now, the way Kingdom Hearts games have been made is that we would watch the movies and copy the costumes as we saw them. But this time around, because we wanted to be really accurate and we wanted to have everything down to the last details completely the same, we decided to ask Disney to share their resources with us, which they did.
A walking, talking snowman! You really are alive!
Disney provided the original polygon shapes of characters from its properties, with guidelines for how more detail was to be placed on top. Square Enix designers then added hair and clothing materials. Essentially, for characters like Frozen's Elsa, there's a tiny piece of the original digital model in your game, hidden under layers of added pixel paint. That original model really is a tiny piece of the final result, however. Disney's assets weren't made to be used in a game, meaning that when Square received them, they didn't quite work right away. Joints in bodies weren't defined and had to be added manually. Physics-enabled objects like capes were built for much more advanced calculations than gaming tech can handle moment to moment, and needed to be rejigged to stop your console from just bursting into flames. Hair proved a particular sticking point.
Disney was very concerned with what Elsa's hair looked like. Of course, she's got this beautiful golden white hair that's always really flowing and beautiful, and when we got the data, her hair was just kind of straight back. And so we used animation initially to bring it forward. But no matter how we did that, it didn't quite look right. It always kind of looked a little weird. And Disney was not happy with that. And so ultimately what we had to do, we told them, with the data you guys gave us and what we're working with, we can't make it look any better than this. And so what we ended up doing was we ended up remaking the hair, not from the model that Disney gave to us. And it was kind of the one part that was like, oh, this doesn't make sense. We're not supposed to be changing anything, but we have to change it to make it look like it looked in the actual movie itself.
Naturally, both Disney and Pixar are fairly exacting about how their properties look in someone else's game, and that goes pretty deep. But in what might seem like a counterintuitive approach, Square's found that the more outlandish a change it wants to make to a character, the more likely it is to be approved with little fuss by Disney. The Lion King's Simba, for example, appears as what co-director Tai Yasue calls a fire entity. It seems like a tall order, but Yasue says they didn't have a lot of difficulty getting him through. The point is that if you're changing the character enough, it's no longer imitating Disney's work.
He's not Simba. Yeah. So we showed him, obviously, right? And we showed Disney our drawings and everything with Disney and shared that, and we got that approved. But at the same time, it wasn't the real character. So I think in that respect, it was easier.
Mike Wazowski!
Huh?
Disney and Pixar don't just require changes once things have been made. In some cases, they need to approve almost every stage of design, from concept to the finished product. Every department has its own stories of what needed to be checked and when.
There's a lot of different stages for each sort of, I guess it depends on what you're making. For cutscenes, for example, we have, I guess it's like a waterfall. You have the plot, the story, the storyboards. We get checked each time, right?
Elsewhere, the approach differs. Gameplay involves brainstorming what Disney sees as fitting for its worlds and characters before letting the teams in question see a walkthrough of the game in action and offering comments. For gameplay animators, every individual action is approved down to the smallest detail.
We'll program an action and Disney or Pixar will say, well, that's a little bit too violent, or they wouldn't do that sort of thing. When it came to Remy specifically, they talked a lot about the precise movements of his tail.
Disney's work wasn't just corrective though, it's collaborative too. The animation team tells me that when Square wanted to make a Wreck-It Ralph summon that pounds the ground and presented Disney with the storyboard, the Disney team pointed out a scene in the first film in which he does just that. It solved the problem and brought a sense of continuity to the character between the movies and the game. All this work doesn't just mean that it's a more authentic representation of Disney, however. Some Square Enix developers put the legendary film studio's feedback down to helping them become better visual storytellers as a whole.
Pixar was actually quite specific about the things that they wanted us to change when they viewed it in the blocking phase. And one of the things was line of sight. And that was something that we had probably not paid as much attention to as we should have. And they really taught us a lot about line of sight and what we should be paying attention to. Ultimately, we ended up doing the Pixar scene, a lot of Pixar scenes very early on in the process, and what they taught us about line of sight really helped up the quality of the animation throughout the game.
It seems like Pixar animators aren't over the novelty of seeing their films in a Kingdom Hearts context. It's worth remembering that some of the films being recreated were made with technology less advanced than what Square is using, and the response from those not offering direct advice to Square Enix could be the highest of praise.
The feedback was always like, oh, it looks great. It looks so nice to have it in such high quality. And it was actually to the extent where Pixar was saying that some people who had seen it were like, wait, are you guys making a new movie? Because it was so close to, I mean, it was exactly like what it was supposed to look like.
Yes, it might be the biggest, oddest, and sometimes pickiest collaboration in games, but it might also be the most rewarding for those making it. If you're after even more Kingdom Hearts 3 info, why not check out our review of the game, or our rundown of its story up until now in just 5 short minutes.